Hi again. Today I will talk about two emotions, despair and hope. Think of a spectrum, a line, and think of hope towards the right end of the spectrum and despair towards the left end of the spectrum. In terms of direction, right and left for no particular reason, but just as a device, right? Why do I reduce a very complex patchwork of emotional life of human beings to these two giant emotions? I think we are either hopeful for the sake of simplicity, for the sake of time. Of course, it will take a few books, and people have written about it extensively, but here, it is not, of course, easy to go into, particularly if you want to be brief a little bit. You can read about it. Of course, there are many books and articles scholars have written about it, especially psychologists and also philosophers. But this is my idea, right? This hope and despair on the spectrum. When we are happy, when life is going the way we want it to go, and when there is happy things happening, we're successful and so on, so hope comes up, and happiness comes up, and then or we try to hope, right, and for things to get better, right? But when things don't get better, when we are hit by tragedy after tragedy, after pain, and suffering after suffering, and grief after grief, we tend to slide towards the left, right? Towards despair. Now, the difference between hope and despair is that hope, as the French philosopher Gabriel Marcel said, hope is for the soul as breathing is for the living organism, right? Now, of course, it is a very important point that Marcel makes. Hope is, as in Urdu we say, "Umeed pe dunya kaim hai," as in the world is built on hope. But for a lot of people, hope isn't always what Marcel says or what this expression in Urdu says. Um, and that I think is expressed very precisely in another adage or saying that hope is a good breakfast but a bad supper, which means that yeah, it could be good for a little while, but if hope doesn't give you what you are seeking, you could be very disappointed in it. It's like something is if somebody promised you something and then they didn't deliver on that something, you're going to be very angry and you're going to be very disappointed and even hateful towards them and just relinquish and give up on that person or on that thing. So I think that seems to be the case here also with hope, is that hope to hope and for things to not get better is to be completely utterly disappointed. But also somewhere, I mean, you start to you continue to hold on to that thing, right? But there comes a moment when you just give up on it and you slide to the left, to despair. Why? Because to hope requires a lot of intellectual labor, I think. Despair also, but hope particularly, I think, you have to give yourself like positive thoughts and positive energy and positive um, you know um, uh, attitude towards the most difficult things that you go through in life. Um, now despair is the opposite of hope. Despair tells you that, look, it's not good here. I warned you not to maybe come towards me, but despair is very tempting also when hope doesn't deliver on what it, what we hope. You see, I'm using the word hope there too, is that what we think hope does, when hope doesn't do that, uh, despair becomes very tempting. So we slide towards despair, knowing that despair is brutal yet honest. And it also seems to me, although there is, I think, more to say, that despair, it also doesn't require probably as much intellectual labor as hope does, because to despair is just to give up, to relinquish on hope, on self, on probably life. But here is the important thing: we can't live in despair for too long. We can't remain there for too long, right? Those of us who remain in despair for too long, I think, end up very, very seriously ill. I mean, physically and psychologically and mentally, and of course, very, very tragically and sadly. And it can happen to anybody. Even, I mean, it could lead to a very, very fatalistic and very, very societal tendencies, and even the end of life, right? So we sort of, I think, it seems to me that we are not in either of the two places. We don't live or reside in hope. We don't reside in despair. We reside somewhere in the middle. I think uh, that probably is the nature's way of maintaining its equilibrium. We don't reside in any of these two giant emotions. We reside somewhere in the middle, and we are almost always residing in a moment, or in the moment of deciding to choose what emotion, or any of these two emotions, right? So we and I call that the spectrum, this the zone of emotional movement, right? So we move on the spectrum towards hope or despair, and I don't think we can afford to be in either of the we can afford to be in either of the two places. So we are, I think, in movement of emotions, and we either move towards despair, or despair on the left, or hope. And of course, that choice, I would, if I were to put in existentialist philosophical terms, we do choose to a greater degree, although within constraints, which of the two emotions, right? And even sometimes, even if we don't choose anything, we are still choosing some kind of a neutral space, right, or emotional space, right? There are times when you don't want to choose anything, you're indecisive. But even there, if you're not choosing anything, you're choosing not choosing either of the two emotions, right? And that, I would say, is a zone of emotional neutrality, and you just don't know which one to decide. And again, I'm not saying it's always easy to choose. Sometimes we don't even know. This is, again, simplifying very complex emotional world, but it is also the inspiration that is driving me to say, or to record this, is to say that it's okay if you're not choosing hope. It's okay even sometimes if you're choosing despair, because it's very tempting when hope doesn't deliver what we think it should. But also, it is important to remember that none of these emotional, zones, which you can say, one of hope, one of despair, are predetermined. I take I think, an existentialist view on this, that we are free, and we, with freedom and responsibility, even if our freedom is constrained by political, economic, historical, sociological, emotional, whatever, socialized, our socialization, all of those worlds, all of those things, even if they constrain our choice, our ability to choose, we can still, in almost most moments, choose where to be on the spectrum. And it's important to remember that we're not made for hope entirely or for despair. We are move. We are movement. We move. With changing times and circumstances. Sometimes the choice is much more difficult than other times, but it seems to me that we are almost always in the moment of choosing which emotion to keep and where to stay. And I think that gives us a lot more leeway and flexibility with life, with decisions that we make, and just with being and doing nothing and not choosing anything, just staying neutral. And that's fine. And I think that makes life uh, comparatively much more bearable, especially in moments where we think we can't continue to breathe, we can't continue to live, we can't continue to exist. But I think there is almost always a way. And yeah, I hope this makes sense. I'll see you again with something new. And yeah, I hope you will listen to this. Thank you.